Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, joined by our producer, Justin Stein. We've got Will Hester, one of the most skilled DFS players in the world and SIS's Vice President of Engineering and Product. He's remade his fantasy strategy. He's remade the technology infrastructure at SIS. And I'm here to pick the brain of one of the smartest guys in the game. Will, welcome to Off the Charts.
Thank you for the kind words, Matt. I've been a listener of the pod for a bit now. Always enjoyed listening to you host and happy to make my podcast debut right here on Off the Charts.
Awesome. All right. So we'll talk about everything from your time at DraftKings, building their platform, to all of your profitable strategies as it pertains to sports wagering of different sorts. But first, let's start with what's most important. You are the biggest college football fan I know. When I first met you, you actually started asking me to play a game of just naming the most obscure college football players that you can think of. And I'm humbled by your ability to do so. It makes sense being a big college football guy. You're from the great college football town, Austin, Texas. How pumped are you about Arch Manning to the Longhorns?
Oh, man, it's hard to describe how good it feels. I mean, good emotionally, good for the program, good for the city. It really does feel like his commitment and all the commits that have come literally every single day since has been the best moment Texas football has had since the 2010 national championship game, which I guess really just speaks to how disappointing the last 12 years have been, that a 6-word tweet from a high schooler who won't step foot on campus for another year is the highlight. But nevertheless, I'm fully locked into the optimism and hook 'em horns.
It amazes me, being such a New Yorker and just being so pro-focused, pro-centric. When I meet people like you, that it's I think the one thing I'll have to say that I have to give to college football over pro football, your passion for Texas football, I can't compete with that. Maybe when I was 12, I could, but not as an adult.
Yeah, man. I mean, the way I describe it to most folks who, aren't from Texas or aren't, familiar with college football is that, most people, I think, probably talk about the NFL quite a bit during the season and here and there during the off season. I mean, the group chat I have with my buddies, I mean, we are talking football, college football every single day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I have the group chat that I always keep going with all of my friends from the University of North Carolina, even though I'm a Duke guy. So I don't know why I put myself through it, but I pretty much am just always constantly going back and forth with them about basketball. So probably a similar vibe there.
Yeah, probably not too good for your Dukies in the football streets there.
Oh, no. Yeah, we keep the conversation away from that. That's just silly. All right. So you started in Austin, you've returned to Austin, but in between, you did spend a little bit of time in New York City. Should I take your return to Austin to mean that you didn't enjoy your time at Cornell Tech?
Not at all, man. I love New York. I mean, I lived in Hell's Kitchen for a while I was in grad school. I met friends for life. I had the time of my life while I lived in New York. I think everyone should live in New York for at least a year, preferably in your 20s. You just really cannot replicate that experience. So you definitely will not find any New York hate from me. I go back frequently. I love the place.
Yeah, definitely in your 20s. I'm at a point in my life where I could use somewhere warmer. There are things about Austin that make me jealous there. So, but at Cornell Tech, that was you were the first class of that new thing. And for anybody that knows New York, if you go over on, what's that island called?
Roosevelt Island.
I was going to say Randall's, and I was like, that's not the one. Roosevelt Island, they have those beautiful new buildings there that are part of the campus for Cornell Tech. What was that experience like? What is that program? What's going on over there in that pretty building?
Yeah, so I was part of the very first class at Cornell Tech that included both computer science and MBA master's students. Unfortunately, we were not in the fancy buildings that you see on Roosevelt Island today. We actually had Google donate space to us in the Google building in Chelsea, which I've been told is actually the largest building in Manhattan because it takes up an entire, block.
I can definitely believe that. So I live 2 blocks south of there. So literally, if you go onto the rooftop of my building and you look up, it looks just like a giant cruise ship. It's
Yes.
not the tallest building, but it is so wide. I could believe that the square footage is just, and that's a bigger block than the Empire State Building's block, right?
Yeah. So it's huge. I mean, it is absolutely massive. But we were in basically a space that Google donated for us there while they were building that campus on Roosevelt Island. But the experience was great. I mean, for folks who aren't familiar with the program, it's basically an extension of Cornell's Ithaca campus that's in New York City. It's got kind of a startup slant toward it in terms of the curriculum. So even though my degree was a master's in computer science, I would say about half of the curriculum was traditional computer science focused curriculum, and about half of it was a very kind of startup slant, businessy type of curriculum, and a lot of crossover we had with the MBA students at the campus. But yeah, nowadays they have that just absolutely stunning campus on Roosevelt Island. I think it costs like hundreds of millions of dollars to develop that campus. And, they have way more students now than the small space that we could fit into back when I was there in 2014, 2015. But it was a fantastic program, and they continue to add to it. And there have been some pretty awesome companies and folks that have come through the program already.
I want to sorry, I'm nerding out on this, but I do want to get to like football and talking more about fantasy and stuff like that.
Yes.
Is that was like that's like a carbon neutral building, right? It's like totally environmentally friendly in that sense too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like trying to remember what it is, the LEED certification or whatever. I think it's got like the highest, and I think that's all of the buildings on the campus. So there's a few buildings. There's like there's a hotel that's there. There's obviously a couple of the curriculum, academia focused buildings. And yeah, it's all carbon neutral. And I mean, if you ever get the chance to walk around, to take a tour in there, I remember the first time I stepped foot in there, it was like literally walking through the future. Just an incredible building.
All right, I'll have to check it out. All right, so you went from Cornell Tech. Before making your way to SIS, you helped build DraftKings into a powerhouse. What was your experience like at DK?
Yeah, so I spent almost 6 years at DraftKings. I remember when I started, it was fairly small. I think I was employee number 111. I started off working on the daily fantasy product. Of course, this is back in 2015. I worked alongside actually our now CEO at SIS, Dan Hannigan Daly, DHD. So we worked together for a while on the daily fantasy products. I also worked on a product called DK Live, which was a kind of fantasy focused box score app. And finally, I was among the first group of engineers who worked on the sportsbook products, which was really a dream come true for me. I mean, building a sportsbook is something I wanted to do ever since I was like 12 years old. I just never thought it would happen because of PASPA, which was the kind of federal law prohibiting betting on sports in the United States, outside of Nevada, of course. So we did build the sportsbook product way ahead of PASPA being repealed, kind of in anticipation that would occur. And man, what a day in the office it was when PASPA did get repealed. I mean, there was champagne, there was clapping. It was a lot of like validation, for all of the work that we were doing over the previous, I think it was about six or 7 months. And, wow. There was certainly no certainty that PASPA would be repealed. So just massive relief. And of course, we did end up launching that product on August 1st, 2018, being the first online sportsbook in the country outside of Nevada. And we were live with 0 competitors for 2 weeks. So it really, that was just a testament that head start that we had to the work that we put in ultimately on that product. And, I think that's certainly the thing I'm most proud of about my time at DraftKings is the sportsbook product, but just the experience of seeing a company grow from, 100 employees when I first started up to, there were literally thousands by the time that I left. And it was just a very unique experience to see a company grow that big, that fast. And I consider myself lucky to be a part of that because I don't think many people get that experience in their careers.
Yeah, that's really cool. You and DHD both played such a big role there, obviously. And then like being literally the people that built the sports book. That's so great. Like what a big bet to bet 6 to 7 months for, I'm assuming at least an entire team to build, and the DK Sportsbook is awesome now. I think it's one of the best ones that's going out there. But like, what if that had like, was that weird working on that, knowing that like this might not happen? Like,
I mean, there was always contingency type of plans that we'd still be able to use the product in some respects, like internationally, for example. But obviously, the big bet was on PASPA being repealed and sports betting taking off in the United States. And I never really thought about it personally, like the joy I really got out of building the product for me, as an engineer was just building something new from scratch and building something that was complex technically and just really exciting and engaging for me. So I don't think it ultimately would have mattered too much to me because I would have been proud of the work that I put into the product.
That's awesome. I'm humbled by that answer. Let's switch over and talk about a little bit of the other side of what you do on the DFS. And as somebody that loves DFS, I would have assumed that you weren't allowed to participate in that sort of thing as an employee of a company like DraftKings. But they actually have a different solution for people like you. So what are the rules for DraftKings employees?
Yeah, so we basically had employee-only contests. So contests that only employees could enter into, and these contests corresponded to a specific public contest, a public contest that you or anyone in the public could enter. We, the employees, would still pay an entry fee, just like the public, to get into these employee-only versions. But every night after the public got paid out on those public contests, DraftKings would kind of on the back end merge the two contests together, the public and the employee only version. And wherever the employee would have placed in the public contest, the employee would get paid out as such. So as an example, let's say an employee would have gotten first place in a public contest. Of course, the member of the public would get paid out their first place prize, but the company would also pay out that first place prize to the employee as well. And DraftKings just kind of, in the cases where employees did well, they just kind of ate that cost as a way of, getting their employees to continue to engage with the daily fantasy product without,
Right.
sacrificing any of the public's experience.
Right. There is value there. And certainly with the amount of money they were throwing at advertising and stuff like that, I'm sure they could absorb that sort of a thing.
Yes.
So my understanding is that you absolutely kicked ass in these DK only, mirroring tournaments. And the entire world should be afraid of you now that a year has passed since you left DraftKings and are on the streets as a fully eligible participant in the regular battles. So is that true? Did you absolutely destroy this? And should the world fear Will Hester?
I did have some good runs while I was an employee at DraftKings and in those employee only contests. I spent a lot of time, in fact, most years, all of my time outside of work on kind of improving my DFS craft. But I'm very excited that the year has passed and I'm now allowed to play in DraftKings public contests again. We'll see about if the success can continue to translate there. I mean, the game has gotten way harder since I first started. I mean, there are a lot of really, really good players out there, and I know I have to significantly step my game up, but you guys will see me out there in the NFL streets certainly come September.
Nice. Okay. So you said you spend all of your non-work time building some of those models for that sort of stuff, or I shouldn't even say that. That's making an assumption. What is your process like that enables you to win or enabled you to have that success in the past?
Yeah, so it certainly differs by sport, and there's a lot of nuances and just differences in it. I think I could probably spend 2 hours answering that question. But I think
are you going after? Is it NFL or is it like do you go after WNBA and stuff like that, or are you all the above?
It depends. I think with the amount of time I'd like to spend now, I certainly won't be attacking every sport. I've been dabbling a little bit with MLB so far this season. But, really prepping for the classic NFL contest, so the normal contest everyone's familiar with for this upcoming season. And for college football in particular, which is my favorite DFS sport, I'm sure most listeners, unsurprisingly, can imagine that. But I'll probably be focusing on showdown college football contests this year as, most college football days, I will be, at the stadium for the Texas home games and out and about for any away games. So don't have the time I need in order to dedicate to the classic contest, but certainly single games when I'm able to be at a computer, I'm gearing up for that.
Nice. So basically, you've got to be there. You've got to be kind of locked in order to. You say you got to be at a computer in order to do your thing.
Absolutely.
How much of what you're doing there is automated and or algorithmic versus kind of manual and based on your own intuition?
Yeah, I mean, it varies wildly by sport. Like, for example, when we launched. Yeah, so I mean, for example, like when we first launched our single game daily fantasy product at DraftKings with MLB, and I think it was 2018, my process was literally clicking a button in a spreadsheet to import my projections, and it would spit out the lineups that I wanted to play based on a certain archetype of lineup. And that was by far the most profitable game mode of my DFS career. And mind you, at the time, I probably couldn't even name you 10 MLB players.
You found something soft there that you were able to out strategize in the way that you formed your lineups.
That's right. But on the other end of the spectrum, NFL, for example, I mean, it is incredibly time intensive with a lot of manual inputs. I mean, there's so much good data out there, so much good content. It makes it a really competitive space. And I mean, at the peak of my not having a life and spending 100% of my time outside of work on DFS, I'd be spending, at least 50 hours a week, every week of the NFL season, just doing research leading up to Sunday. And then obviously on Sunday, waking up at 5 a.m., putting it all together before lock. It was a very, very manual process. It still is to a large extent. I mean, these days I do have some assists that help me decide things like how much exposure to certain players I might want, but it's still very much so subjective. And, I'm even going over notes that I take during, red zone on Sundays on Sunday mornings when I'm making lineups.
Nice. So it really relies on your brain. That's the key cog there.
For NFL, absolutely.
Very interesting. So if you were talking to somebody with or without a tech background, you can choose how you want to answer it, that was trying to get started with DFS or sports betting, what advice would you give them?
Well, first I'd separate DFS and sports betting. I mean, they're both wildly different animals. And the first thing I'd say is that if you want to get really good at either and start taking it seriously and becoming profitable, be prepared to spend a significant amount of your time with this. But so for DFS, I think the first place I'd start with is a few books. I mean, anything that Jonathan Bales has written is pure gold. I would absolutely start there. Additionally, if you haven't read The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver before, I think that one was really kind of foundational for my understanding of several things. Super Forecasting by Philip Tetlock is a great one. And I think maybe the most important one for me was a book called Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Taleb. Quick caveat on Taleb, if you aren't familiar with him, he spends half of all of his books just talking smack about economists and anyone who's ever written anything bad about him. So if you can get over those parts of the book, the actual content is incredibly valuable.
Sounds awesome. So wait, you can read a book that's really good and get cheap heat just along the way, like it's like Vince McMahon out there. I'm loving this.
It is. I don't know, man. You should give some of his books a read. It is mad. It is maddening sometimes. You read a paragraph that's like, wow, it really makes you think and how you can apply this to your own processes. And then the next 5 paragraphs are just him, unloading on some New York Times writer or something.
So unnecessary. Yeah,
it is an experience, his books. But yeah, other than that, on the DFS side, I mean, get comfortable with spreadsheets. I practically dream in Google Sheets half the time. And the last piece of advice I'll give is contest selection is everything in DFS. I mean, pay close attention to the rake, the payout structures of the contest you're playing in. I mean, make sure that they align with your goals. If you're the type of person who doesn't mind, long periods of losses, but you want the chance for a big payday, then hey, maybe those top-heavy payout structures are stomachable for you. But I think for most people, you're much better off with single entry contests or 3-entry max contests, and always max enter any contest that you're choosing to enter, assuming it's within your financial means. And be wary of your exposures, how much you're playing certain players, especially versus what you expect the field to do. For sports betting, I mean, there's just so much. I think the absolute first thing you should do is read a book called The Logic of Sports Betting by Ed Miller and Matthew Davidow.
I'm mid that book right now.
Yes, it is straight up the Bible. I mean, it'll teach you everything you need to know, but you really do need to do the math as you kind of, put a lot of what they're preaching into practice. Take their advice. I mean, you should have an account at every sports book if you're taking it seriously. You should be line shopping with every bet. You should be taking advantage of certain promos that the sports books are offering you. I mean, the name of the game for sports betting is squeezing out every last bit of expected value that you can.
It's pretty apparent right off the top of that book, the author's disdain for American odds. And then they start explaining the math of it. And it's oh God, I hate American odds too.
Even before the book, I think of everything in terms of probabilities. So my entire life, I've always looked at decimal odds. It's just a really simple conversion. 1 divided by the decimal odds is the applied probability. I mean, it doesn't get much simpler than that.
It's 1,000 times better. And it's annoying. Now that I know that, it's annoying that it's not that way to begin with. All right. So I do want to get into a little bit about your role at SIS because you're one of the most important hires we've ever made. You've completely transformed our company in terms of what we're capable of from a tech standpoint. So first of all, what is your role at SIS?
Yeah, so I'm the VP of Product and Engineering here at SIS, which is really just a fancy way of saying that I run product development for us. So this includes everything from overseeing the development of some kind of behind the scenes software that our listeners may not even be aware of, like our data collection software, even to public facing products like the NFL draft site, which I hope all of our listeners checked out, and some more exciting stuff that we're excited to share with the world soon enough.
So what are some of the accomplishments over the past year that you're most excited about? And you're not allowed to say the NFL draft website.
Oh man, I wish I could say the NFL draft website. That was just an awesome project. But since I can't say that, I'm actually just most excited about the transformation we've undergone as an organization and the incredible folks that we brought on and have made things like the NFL draft site possible in the first place. I mean, it really just means that we're maturing as a product development organization. Our people, both new and existing, are growing as technologists, as product minds, as collaborators, and everything that we drop from here on out is just going to get better and better. That's what I'm most excited about.
I couldn't agree more. Everybody from the engineers that have come on to the engineers that existed that we've seen a transformation in what they're capable of. The designers that we brought on are amazing with, just the way that they think about UX, UI is just something that was it's kind of mind blowing to me how smart they are in that area. So all of that. And we are growing. I think as we learn to integrate kind of all of us sports folk with more of your team, I think we're going to keep growing and keep enabling us to do even more. So I'm pumped about that. What are some things that are in development or on the roadmap that you're excited about? Can you tease here?
There's honestly, the things I'm most excited about are pretty team focused. So, I don't know if our listeners will be able to get too much of a glimpse into those, but there is one public facing product in particular that we're working on in partnership with another group that I know our listeners are going to come to enjoy. And if you liked our NFL draft site, for those listeners out there that did, I think you'll like what we have kind of coming down the pipeline next.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said there. And for what it's worth, I think just so that we don't get people upset thinking we're spending all our times on team stuff, a lot of that team stuff, there's plans down the road to kind of build public facing versions of. So there's definitely stuff to be excited about on the football, baseball, and basketball fronts, not to mention CBL, BKFC, all the stuff that we're doing there.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Now you're allowed to talk about the NFL draft website. Most of our listeners are very familiar. There are tons of things that you can touch and see that are awesome about the site, but there's more to it behind the scenes in the tech. I did want to pick your brain real quick about what are some of the advantages about the way that it's built? What are some of the things that really excite you, whether it's the scalability or anything from that sort of tech side of things?
Yeah. So first of all, absolute massive shout out to our lead front-end engineer, Joe Baranowski. Joe has a real knack for building reusable code. And that front end is obviously the star of the show on the NFL draft website. Everything that our listeners see on those NFL draft site pages are made with reusable components, meaning that as we expand that site with additional functionality, when we need another, let's say, table to display some new data that we're collecting, we don't need to spend the time to build another table. We've already done that. We've already made it look beautiful. We've already made it responsive, meaning that the component works and looks great, whether you're on your desktop or your phone. We don't need to kind of reinvent the wheel there. We can take that existing table component and just drop the new data in it, making it easy for us to, add new features and new data onto the NFL draft site. And further, when we build out other experiences, outside of just the NFL draft site, wink, wink, listeners, we have an entire library of components that are already styled according to our SIS guidelines. We can drop those right into the new experiences and able to spin up, new products very fast because of those reusable components that we created throughout building the NFL draft site, for example. So a lot of that upfront investment, makes for a lot quicker development on the engineering side for all the future stuff that we're excited to show off to you guys, the listeners.
So sounds like no more like 1990s looking websites. for
Definitely
SIS going into the future. No, but it makes sense when you said before about how you're excited about all the infrastructure that's been built. I think that's kind of what you were talking about. Like it's not just that it's that there's been an investment made to make things easier in the future that is starting to really reap benefits. It's awesome.
Yes.
All right. Before you go, I want to pick your brain about the college football season. NIL has obviously changed everything. You mentioned before you're very excited about how things have gone for the Arch Manning and what's followed for Texas football. Just as somebody who follows the sport incredibly closely, how has NIL impacted things like Texas football and their future? And how has it affected the larger ecosystem in general?
Yeah, I mean, first off, let me just say I'm so grateful for the student athletes that they're finally able to get paid. I mean, how insane was it that, you could have an arts student on scholarship be able to sell their artwork for thousands of dollars, yet your local school's running back couldn't make a couple $100, pitching a car dealership in a radio ad simply because they were an athlete. I mean, just insane. But so
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. That said, I mean, there is, the obvious problem that you're not supposed to use NIL for inducing folks to come to a school, which is, in many cases impossible to improve and extremely hard to enforce. So, with the obvious problems like that aside, I mean, really, as far as who stands to gain the most, to me, it's the schools obviously with the most money, and no one has more money than Texas. So I'm grateful that it exists, as we, in theory, stand to gain the most. As far as the ecosystem as a whole, I mean, it does nothing if not make the sport more engaging and entertaining than it already is. I mean, anything from, a star running back who gets a Lamborghini deal, or, maybe questionably talented quarterback who has a deal with a moving company called College Hunks. I mean, the sport is just so dang entertaining. How can you not love it when you have deals like this?
You got to love some College Hunks. So I don't get the sense that Arch Manning choosing to go to Texas was probably about NIL money. Like, I've seen ridiculous numbers, like he's worth $3 million on NIL deal. I'm like, BS, if he's not worth 10 million, 30 million, like, get out of here. But I know there's a risk that he fades out, but if he has a better career than Cooper Manning, he can be marketable. So do you think that played a big role in there? Do you think it's playing a role, Texas having the most money, in them seeming to have a good sort of recruiting season, or is it something else?
I suspect in the long run that the money will have an impact. I don't know. Arch is obviously the most unique case in maybe the history of college football, especially the recruiting side, because of his famous last name, of course. I mean, obviously everyone saw the flood of commitments in the wake of Arch's commitment of, other folks deciding to come to the University of Texas. I suspect that wasn't because, suddenly the floodgates of money started opening up to them or anything like that. So I think Arch is just a unique case where, his family collectively, I'm sure, are billionaires. So it's not like he has anything to worry about there. I hope that, he chose the University of Texas because he believes in Sark. It's a unique offense. He's going to shine in it, certainly. And he hopefully, believes that he can turn around the frankly, mediocrity we've experienced over the last 12 years. And if that's, if legacy is something that he cares about, like the legacy of his famous uncles, then I think turning around UT would be quite a way to start your legacy as a football player.
It's playing with Joe Burrow is good for Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, and playing with Jamar Chase was good for Joe Burrow, and on and on. So I think part of it is, he just commits, whether there's money involved or not directly. It's a good decision to kind of be around there. And not for nothing, you are at Texas, where if you do start to show out because you're in this offense with Arch Manning and you guys are winning all tons of games and getting national attention, you do stand to make more money directly and indirectly now. So
absolutely.
Any other storylines you have your eyes on going into the college football season?
I mean, obviously, I got my eye on Texas this year, the last year being insanely disappointing, even by our recent kind of mediocre standards. That said, there's not much more of a direction to go but up from here. The offense is going to be stellar this year. I think everyone probably knows that at this point. That's not a surprise. Hopefully Quinn Ewers is the one who starts for us this year. We got awesome receiving talent, the best running back in the country. It's going to be a fun offense to watch. Defense is certainly a bit of a question mark. I'm hoping that Gary Patterson can help out a bit there. But that's going to be the big thing to watch. And boy, are we going to learn early with Bama coming to town, the second game of the season. That's going to be an incredible atmosphere. I mean, any of our listeners who can make it down to Austin for that one, I highly recommend it. Just bring your sunscreen and your coffee because that's an 11 a.m. kickoff. Thanks to our friends at Fox there. Elsewhere, it's a weird year for the Big 12, perhaps again. OU is a decent sized question mark for the first time since I can remember. New coaching staff, new quarterback. Speaking of Oklahoma, we're coming off a season where they didn't make the conference title game for the first time in a decade. Elsewhere in the Big 12, Oklahoma State seemed last year to be a defensive team somehow. We'll see if they can get the offense going again with a pretty good quarterback returning. A K-State team without Coach Snyder that was pretty good last year, destroyed LSU in their bowl game. They got going a lot. K-State got good a lot, faster than I thought they might. Tech has a new coach who just seems to be getting all the Texas high school kids back together, and it looks like they're going to air it out again. Should be fun. Dave Aranda's turned around Baylor a lot faster than I thought he would. It's just going to be a competitive league, top to bottom. And, I think we could end up seeing a conference title game as unexpected as we had last year in Baylor and Oklahoma State. Outside of my neck of the woods, obviously going to be interesting to see what Georgia's defense looks like after having, about 100 dudes drafted on that side of the ball this past April. And if they do end up struggling and needing to score points, it's going to be super interesting to see what Stetson Bennett looks like having to throw when the defense knows it's coming. Let's see. Elsewise, from a personnel standpoint, Ohio State just had two receivers go back-to-back in the first round, and it's possible that neither of them was even the best receiver on this team.
Right.
Jackson Smith and Jigba is just stupid talented. He had 350 receiving yards in the bowl game. That's crazy. It's going to be fun to see what he does this year with another good quarterback and someone named Marvin Harrison Jr. as well on that offense.
That'll get you a little nervous. So you have to guard that guy, huh?
Oh, I know. I'm Marvin Harrison is like the reason I played football growing up. He's my favorite player of all time. I'm interested, I'll say, to see what his kid does, but just a scary offense top to bottom that Ohio State squad's going to be. In the ACC, how good is Tyler Van Dyke? When he came on for Miami last year, he after the first couple games, against tough opponents, once he actually started getting rolling, he looked awesome. They only lost one game after those first two, and it was by 3 points. And this was basically a dude that we knew almost nothing about going into the season because everyone was expecting D'Eriq King to be the star there. It's going to be interesting to see if he's able to continue that high level of play. And as a fan of Miami from those 2000s days, I'm definitely rooting for his success, Miami's success.
It'd be really if he can start having some success there with their investment in NIL as a university. I think that we could see the return of the U.
Dude, bring it on, man. College football is just better when Miami's good. And, another team that's like that is USC. How good are they going to be in Lincoln Riley's first year? As someone who had to watch that offense score seemingly every damn drive against us in certain years, know exactly how potent an offense led by Lincoln Riley can be. But that team does undergo a lot of transformation, both from the coaching staff, the roster through the transfer portal. Even though you have the continuity, if you will, between the coach and the quarterback, can they get to a top of a weak Pac-12 immediately? We'll see. But college football is better when teams like Miami and teams like USC are better. And I'm the type of person who loves those Pac-12 after dark games. So I'm going to be rooting for that quick USC turnaround.
Yeah, I would bet on it also. I think that Lincoln Riley will quickly establish himself as the class of that league. I think if he didn't already, just with the players that he's brought in, which is always a big part of the game in college football. At the end of the day, though, Will Anderson, Bryce Young, that's the favorite, right?
Yep. Those are going to be the stars of the show, but it's same old. I like Bama. I respect Bama, obviously super talented, but I think some of the things that make college football so interesting are when you do get those dramatic turnarounds or upsets, comebacks, things that don't really apply to Alabama.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I wish there was a little bit more parity in college football. That going back to, I'll give you the credit for the passion, peak passion, but I will take the points for the parity. All right, last question. We'll call it the Garrett Gilbert Award. I'll let you decide if you want to explain that. Who is your favorite player that will play college football in 2022 and why?
Yeah, so Garrett was my high school quarterback. He was, also, I think you forgot a few things to introduce him as well, Matt. That's a Gatorade National Player of the Year and the only MVP in AAF history, Garrett Gilbert, to you, sir. But to answer your question, I think for the Garrett Gilbert Award, I think I have to go and play the homer card here and go with Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers. I mean, he's got the mullet. He's going to have all the NIL deals. He's the second ever perfect rated quarterback coming out of high school, the first being Vince Young. If Texas finally is able to take a big step forward, it'll be because of him. So that's my answer. The 2022 National Championship quarterback and Heisman Trophy winner, Quinn Ewers.
We've got breaking news here for the football research team. Stephen Polacheck, Alex Vigderman, James Weaver called you in this emergency situation. Stephen, what did you just tell us?
According to John Wilner, and then confirmed by Sports Illustrated, USC and UCLA are planning to leave for the Big Ten as early as 2024. So, I guess the counter move to the SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma, the Big Ten's going to grab
Los Angeles.
Yes. Somebody said, I did not expect to see Nebraska as the geographical center of the Big Ten, but here we are.
That should not be understated. The geographical part, even just Seattle.
Rutgers was bad enough.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the Western divisions in professional sports where Seattle's off on its own, and that creates such a different travel profile.
So the hard part is, in my opinion, what we're all, I don't want to say all, what you can't overlook is this goes to more than football. And now all of a sudden your golf, your cross country, your tennis teams, they have to fly cross country just to make any match. That's kind of the point of conferences, was because they're all geographically next to each other. But now that we're going, I guess the media deal is just that lucrative that it doesn't matter.
Also, that seems like you have really interesting, because the weather there is so different that the kinds of sports and what you're recruiting for is totally different. The level of competition is crazy different.
Wait until these LA kids have to travel to play in Happy Valley in November, where it's 15 degrees and sleeting. Little different.
The LA kids from Oklahoma.
What in the world?
Wow.
I mean, this puts the Pac-12 in a crazy spot, because now what do you do with Oregon they're in Stanford and Utah and Colorado? There are good athletic programs sitting there that now does the Big 12 end up being the island of misfit toys,
or
and the Pac whatever number they're going to be?
Yeah, the Pac-4. But you bring more Mountain West team. I don't know. That's.
Well, BYU, you want to say a rumored forever, they just jumped into the Big 12 now.
This is the advantage.
We thought this was the American Athletic Conference was going to do this, but it's the Big Ten.
This is the advantage of naming your conference non-geographically, right? You can do whatever you want.
Oh, you can do whatever you want either way, clearly. Clearly, they're doing whatever they want. We're Big Ten. We're not constrained. We can do this.
Aside from the fact that the number is inaccurate, but whatever.
Number already wasn't accurate.
Yeah.
We built a logo around the fact that there was a hidden 11 in the name Big Ten. But regardless, I was doing the ACC the other day just came out with their new football schedule. And basically they put the teams into not pods, but they made it so that every team has a guaranteed 3, you want to call them rivalries. So it's a protected game. They will play them every year. So one of them, for whatever reason, I just know off the top of my head, is Clemson, Georgia Tech. Every year, Clemson and Georgia Tech will play each other. That's just, it will always happen. And then you will play over a 4-year span. You will play every other team twice, home and away. So you will play in a 4-year span. You will play every team in the conference at least once, home and away, and you have protected rivalries. So it gives a,
I like how you said forever. Like this conference is going to exist in 2 years.
Well, I guess it's the point of. I mean, the NFL schedule is built on a algorithm now, and I guess they tried to do that for
a little bit more consistency in the divisions in the NFL.
Sure, a little bit. And I was doing the exercise yesterday of what does the Big Ten do? To copy exactly what the ACC does. What are your what are your 3 games for each team? And I was struggling to find like what makes sense to counteract the issue of too many good teams play each other too much. That's
smaller conferences.
The problem that it's run into. That's what I start to get to. Well, we should have 8 conferences in college football with 10 in each. But
it's almost like we in college sports we would have this like overarching body that could regulate things and make rules that were in everybody's interest. If only something like that existed.
I feel like we're trending towards a example of the European soccer world where, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with that.
Financial fair play. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much absolute chaos. And like they've forever been stuck to like, you have your domestic league and that's your conference.
You're right. With the NCAA not having any power anymore, it's basically a complete free market.
They're seeing the money that comes in with when Ohio State plays Oregon, look at the amount of money we make. Like there's something to be had here. We don't care about playing Rutgers in Indiana. We want to play Oregon and Texas.
Right?
Right. And so you're getting these, I want to say, well, they are
Real Madrid and Barcelona, and then
Vanderbilt
is just there.
Vanderbilt football is going to play Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, like all in the season. I have no words. They're just going to fall way off, and we can do the same exercise with any of these schools. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's the world of, if you looked at it in just a football sense, I've done the exercise many a times of how to realign all the conferences that make sense geographically and like put, I want to say, equal weight in all different legs. But it doesn't all end there. I mean, part of the Big Ten, at least from being and Weaver, I think you can attest to this, being Penn Staters and a part of the Big Ten conference, part of that conference has always had a stress on like academics. Like any school that's in this athletic conference has to be of a certain level academically. I have no idea where USC, UCLA fit on that, but that was the number one argument against some of the other rumored schools that were coming up back when Oklahoma and Texas jumped into the SEC.
This is amazing. Well, I'm still flabbergasted. I can't believe on a day where we had this wonderful interview with Will Hester, one of the greatest college football fans. Right after we finished with him, this news comes out. Had to bring the group together to break it down. For Stephen Polacheck, Alex Vigderman, James Weaver, and of course, Will Hester and Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.